Hi, I'm Ben McCart, and I want to thank you for your interest in my child discipline program, Raising Adults. For nearly 2 decades, this program has been helping parents teach their children how to be responsible, self-disciplined adults. What you will see on this program is the result of 30 years' experience, both as a parent of 5 children of my own and as a marriage counselor for the last 17 years, teaching other families, both in private practice and in seminars, how to get the results they want with their children. When my children were small, I was a naval flight officer. I didn't really know any more about parenting than anyone else. In fact, I did what most of us do. I taught my kids what I'd learned from my parents. But after years of working with thousands of parents, I've learned how important these principles are and why they work. I think as parents, we have 2 jobs. One is to teach our children how to live successfully with us. And the second, more important job is to teach them how to live successfully without us. It's a matter of giving our children roots and wings. Several years ago, I was in an airport waiting for a plane, which I guess is what you do in airports, and there was a small boy about 4 years old, had a ball something like this, was having a wonderful time. He would run up to people. He was in the waiting area there, and he'd go running up to somebody with this ball like he was going to throw it at them, and of course everybody back up and put their arms up. He'd dash right up to him, and then he'd stop, and he'd laugh. And then he'd turn around and he'd look for somebody else and he'd go charging up to them, and always the same way, like he was going to throw this ball. And his mother was sitting over at the end of one of the aisles there of chairs in the waiting room, and she kept saying, "Stop that. Cut that out. Get over here. Stop bothering those people. Now leave them. You get over here and sit down." And she went on and on like this, but she never got up. And you know what? He ignored her. He just kept having this wonderful time. And he ran up to somebody, and he picked the wrong person, though. There was a gentleman there, probably, I'd say, around 70, very nicely dressed, and sitting there quietly, and he came running up to him, the same way he'd done to everybody else. Stopped, and the man just looked at him. He got up, took him by the hand, marched him over to where his mother was, set him in the chair next to her, and said, "Stay there." The little kid was like this. And then he walked back over and sat down, and he just sat there and watched him. And the kid's sitting in that chair like this, looking at Mom, looking at that man, looking at Mom, and Mom's looking at her kid and looking at the man, looking at the kid. You know? Miracle. Now, the reason I tell that is because it's very fundamental to discipline and to what makes it work and what doesn't make it work. All that happened was one person acted, one person didn't. The man did something. Mom just talked about it. And kids do not pay attention to what we say. What they pay attention to is what we do. I don't know what kind of a mom she was. She seemed like a nice enough kid, and she probably was doing a wonderful job of being a nice mom. The problem was that she wasn't being a disciplined parent. She was making a serious mistake in that she was teaching her son to ignore her. That was the problem. She was teaching him to ignore her. And you see, when I talk about raising adults, part of the reason that I term it that way is that kids are just like us. And I know that's a little frightening, but they really are. But that also helps to understand what's going on and how to raise your child to be a responsible adult and not just to grow up. So, to give you an example, how many of you drove here today? How many? Okay. You probably took the freeway. Does everybody know what the speed limit is on the freeway out here? Sure. Okay. Okay. We know what the speed limit is. We know what the rules are, that you're supposed to go a certain speed in certain places, and we know what that is. Anybody know what the consequences are? You don't have to. I had one person said, $280 fine. I don't want, you know. If you just know generally that the consequences are a ticket, that's enough. You all know that. Okay, so we know the consequences. I'm not going to ask you how many of you may have gone faster than the speed limit, but how many of you saw other cars going faster than the speed limit? How many of you saw all the cars going faster than the speed limit? Okay, there's a reason. How often do you get a ticket? You don't have to tell me that either. Not very often, right? When was the last time you got a ticket? So, what's your consistency of experience? It's like that. Hardly ever happens. Why do I need to worry about it? Why need pay attention to the rules and the limits, even if there are consequences, if they never happen? Well, your kids are the same way. You may have limits like, I'm sure that mother had some limits. She was saying the rule is don't pester other people and, get back over here and sit down. I don't know if she had a consequence because he never saw her do anything. But she probably had, at some point, she probably would have done something. But that's the problem. The problem is that he knows that consistently she's not going to do it. And so what does he do? He does the same thing we do on the freeway. He ignores the rules. He ignores Mom. And by the time he's 8 or 10 or 12, she's going to have a real problem. Because he's going to say, what's the point? At 4 years old, he already knows, I don't have to pay attention to you because you don't mean what you say. And if you don't mean what you say, the kids will know it. So, just like the Highway Patrol, Mom is inconsistent. Now, do you think the Highway Patrol really doesn't care? They do. That's why they set up the rules. The state says, this is what we want you to do, and this is what we'll do if you don't do it. But the possibility of a stain chasing you around, I mean, it's like the Highway Patrol coming alongside and saying, cut it out. You say, oh, just kidding, really slow it down. What do they say? They come up and put on that bullhorn that they have. If you don't slow down right away, or this is the last time I'm going to tell you. That's a good one. You ever done that with your kids? How many times do I have to tell you? What kind of a question is that? Kids know they're talking to a banana. How many times do I have to tell you? What do you say? I don't know, 30, 40, 150? How many times? Or when are you going to learn? That's another good one. When are you going to learn? August 3rd. And then you expect them to take you seriously. And the kid walks out and says, what's your question? Oh, they ask me some of those dumb questions they ask with no answers. So that's why their answers are always the same. What are the two most popular answers you get from kids? Oh, no. Oh, no. And the other one is, I forgot. Remember that one? Why didn't you clean up your room? I forgot. If you give a test, take go home, and you tell your child at breakfast 3 things. When you come home from school, I want you to clean up your room, do your homework, and after dinner, we're going to Baskin-Robbins. That evening, I guarantee, in almost every home you'll get home, the room will not be cleaned, the homework may or may not be done, but guess what they'll ask for after dinner? When are we going to Baskin-Robbins? Selective memory. Okay? What about your room? Oh, I forgot. Okay? What about your homework? Oh, no. No. That's one of the reasons we shouldn't ask kids why. Don't ask your kids why. Why'd you do that? I don't know why I did it. What do you want them to say? Why didn't you clean up your room? Because I don't want to. You want that answer? No, they know you don't. So, and what you want them to say is, Mom, Dad, the reason I didn't clean up is because I'm a rotten kid, and I know that I make your life torture and miserable, and I apologize, and I'll promise I'll never do it again. That's what they say. Well, it's about time. You ever hear that, bring your kid in right away. He needs help. They aren't going to say that, folks. Okay, so as far as what our kids are like and what we're like, it's easy to figure out why they're not paying attention. They don't pay attention for the same reason we don't pay attention. Consistency is the only thing that makes anybody pay attention to you. And there's a couple of reasons. One, it makes things predictable. Did you ever think about that? When you're inconsistent, your child doesn't know what the rules are, what really goes on around here. If they know that you say, if you don't clean up your room, you're not doing anything this evening, and you follow through on it, then they know that's predictable. Then they know the way to control their world is to do what you asked. Because if they know that doing it gets them one result, guaranteed, and not doing it gets them another result, guaranteed, then they can make a decision. And those times when they decide, what the heck, I don't care this time, will not be the same as, what the heck, maybe I'll get away with it this time, might as well test you every time. So, first rule, most important thing about effective parenting is that you cannot have door number 3. This is my home game show. You can have door 1, you can have door 2, kids, but you cannot have door number 3. What's door number 1? Door number 1 is if you act as an adult, which is to be responsible and self-disciplined and to figure things out pretty reasonably, then I will treat you as an adult and I will let you control your consequences. But if you act as a child, which is to not be responsible and not be self-disciplined and not bother to figure things out, just kind of let it all happen, then I'll treat you as a child. And I will control your consequences. You know what? Kids don't like to have you control their consequences. They want to control their consequences. So, you can have one. Act as an adult, I'll treat you as an adult. You will control your consequences. Door 2, act as a child, I'll treat you as a child, I'll control your consequences. But you cannot have door 3, which is to act as a child, with no consequences. Wouldn't we all like that? I'd like that. So the consistency is, you can't have door 3. You can't have door 3. You can have door 1, you can have door 2, and I don't care which one you pick. But if you pick door 3, it won't open anymore. It's locked. And there's no way for you to choose it if I'm going to be consistent and enforce it. So there's a real motivation in them to get you off their back. That's why I told my kids, hey, you want me out of your life? I want out of your life. I really do. You know, I wanted to retire. I did not want to be a parent forever. By the way, when I said that this mother was probably a good mom, I am still dad. I won't say I'm a good dad. You'll have to ask my kids about that. I have 5. I have 3 sons and 2 daughters. I don't have any children anymore. Mine are not only grown up, but they have gotten mature. They're responsible, they're self-disciplined, they figure out their own problems. They don't always do it right, but neither do I. If we judged anybody on how well they did it, we'd all be on a short leash. But they handle their own lives. And you see, my idea, my objective was that's exactly what I wanted to have happen. I didn't want to be a parent forever. Dad, I will be dad forever. I will always have sons and daughters. I will always be their dad. But I don't have children anymore, so I'm no longer a parent. See, parenting is time limited. If you do the job right, it's time limited. If you do it wrong, you can still be a parent when your kids are 30 or 40. And that's not a happy situation. So the idea is I wanted to work myself out of a job, the job of parenting. When my kids were little, when they were born, they weren't responsible, and they weren't self-disciplined, and they didn't do their own thinking. You know, how many of you go in and ask a 6-month-old, well, what do you want to wear out today? You know, we're going to the grocery store. What do you wear? They don't care. You know. If it's cold out, what do? You know, you put on one of those big jackets. The kind of makes them look like a little Eskimo. You know. They don't say, don't put that on me. But when they're 8 years old, what do you get? Or when they're 15, they're going out the door, it's about 20 above, and and they're headed out the door, and you say, oh, where are you going? Oh, we're going out to the movie or whatever. Well, it's cold out. You need a jacket. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. You need a jacket. I don't need a jacket. You get upstairs and get a jacket. I don't want a jacket. If you don't get a jacket, you're not going. I'm up the stairs, they go and get a jacket. And they come down with a jacket. And they're starting out the door, and you put that jacket on. I mean, you're not dumb. They got it in their hand. Put it on. Put it on. It's better. And then they leave and put the door. And the jingles on, and the whole house kind of vibrates. And you feel so smug, and they take it off at the corner. And then because they're carrying it around, they're not used to having it, they leave it someplace. They come home and you say, where's your jacket? I don't know, I lost it. Ah! Well, if you've been quiet, you still have a $60 jacket. So what you say is when they're getting out the door and they're old. See, the thing is, you say, well, but my teenager can't remember that. Look, if there's no sense, there's no feeling. They're not going to be bothered by the cold. Let them go. I mean, you may ask. I don't say don't ask, but you say, are you taking a jacket? And they say no. You say, okay. Now when they get to the corner and they begin to turn blue, they might come back and get it. But if they've had a fight with you and they put, I don't need a jacket, you think they'd come back and get one? They would just turn into a popsicle before they'd come home. So, you don't do that. You want a jacket? Don't need a jacket? Go ahead. Have a good time. Okay. The idea is to work yourself out of a job. Stop being a parent. In order to do that, your kids have to take on these three things: responsibility, self-discipline, and what I call thinking and problem solving for yourself. Now what I mean by that is, there's another word for it, and that would be, from their point of view, control, choice, independence. So you can have all those. You can have those if you will be responsible for them. And if you will be self-disciplined enough to do whatever you need to do to take care of your responsibilities. If you'll do that, what did I say? I'll treat you as an adult. You can control your consequences. If you don't do that, sorry, I'm not going to let you run your life if you don't do these. You can't have this one without taking these along with it. And that's all there is to it. That's what I talk about when I say, if your child is acting as an adult, then you know what to do. If they're not, you also know what to do. The idea is, are you being responsible and self-disciplined? Not are you always right, not are you making great choices all the time, but are you doing it in a responsible and self-disciplined manner? That's all. But in order to do that, this problem solving, I have another word for it that I use, and that's what I just would call being self-confident. By that I don't mean proud, I don't mean smug, I don't mean arrogant. I mean the self-confidence that a person gets from knowing no matter what life throws at me, and it is going to throw stuff at you all the time, folks, no matter what it throws at me, I can work through it. I can get through it. The problem for most parents is that they are doing all the thinking and the problem solving, and they forget as the child gets older to stop doing it. Well, that's great. You're getting all the exercise, but who needs it? Your child needs to be practicing thinking and problem solving. You need to see how they're doing and see if they've got it down right. I mean, you don't just let them out the door at 18 or 20 and say, well, good luck, I hope it works out, and right if you get work or whatever. You want to see how they're doing as they go along. So what you want is you want to see them do the problem solving. And that's just a part of putting together discipline that really works to develop responsibility and self-discipline. Let me give you an example, because this is a package deal. This is a package deal. You can't, they want this one. I want it. You ever hear that? I want to do it myself. I want to make my own decisions. Anybody that got one old enough to drive, suddenly they think that they are in charge of their life. I can come in whenever I want. Why? Well, because you don't have to come pick me up. Who said anything about you could come in when you want? You got a license to drive. You didn't get a license to run your own life. That comes later. Maybe for some it's called marriage. I don't know. Well, maybe not. But self-confidence, the ability to run your own life. And that's what I want to see. And it's a package deal. If you will do these things, be responsible, be self-disciplined enough to control what goes on, then I will be more than happy to let you have this one too. Let me give you an example. When my kids were growing up, we had a house for a period of time that didn't have a dishwasher. Well, actually, it had 5 dishwashers, and they rotated. And you'd wash one day, and then you dried, and then you were off for 3 and back on, wash, dry, off for 3, wash, dry. I had 2 of them who always squabbled when they did the dishes. You know that? You didn't get that clean, you didn't dry that, back and forth, just nitpicking each other the whole time they were out there. And I got tired of listening to it. I thought they would get tired of it. They didn't seem to get tired. I think it was kind of their amusement while they were doing this job. But I thought, this can't go on forever. So I decided I'm going to have to stop it. Now, let me ask you this. First test. You've got 2 out of the 5 who, when they do them together, they squabble. So, how are you going to solve that problem? How would you solve that problem? Separate them? Terrific. Now, that is a good answer. It really is a good answer, and it would solve the problem. Of course, you might tie them up with somebody else and find out they'll squabble whoever they are with, but at least you've got the idea working right. Here's the problem with it. Who's doing the thinking and problem solving? You are. So, what I did, I went out and I said, kids, you 2 have a problem. You are always squabbling whenever you do the dishes. So, in order to resolve that, I've got a deal for you. Instead of rotating tomorrow night, we're not rotating. You get to do them again. And if you squabble again tomorrow night, you get to do them again. Because I figure you need practice. Well, wouldn't that stand to reason? They were having trouble with this. If they get enough practice, they'd get over it. I said, so, and I will give you as much practice as you need, kids. I'm a good dad. If you need practice, you got it. And I said, as long as you squabble, you can practice. When you finally figure out how not to squabble, practice is over, we start rotating again. Guess how long it took them to learn not to squabble? Yeah, one night. It wasn't this morning. You don't know? Then you're going to do dishes for a long time. You're going to be able to get a job at McDonald's when you're old enough. I mean, I got 8 years' experience doing the dishes. Of course, I squabble when I do them, but no. The idea is you do the thinking and problem solving. See, I want you to be responsible. I'm not going to be responsible for it. And I want you to be self-disciplined enough to keep your lips zipped. If you'll do those things, guess what? I'll stay out of it, folks. You can control your consequences. Act as an adult, and I will treat you as an adult. You'll control your consequences. Act as a child, I'll treat you as a child, I'll control them, and you know what? You won't like it when I do. My kids used to say, Dad, you are weird. And I come up with these weird consequences for them. I said, you're right, I'm weird. You don't want a weird person running your life, do you? Now get me out of it. Otherwise, weird dad's going to be, oh, here comes weird dad again. You know, yeah, it's some other weird thing for us. No, the whole idea was, okay, you want me out of your life? I'm happy to get out of your life. Okay, what we do is important. But what is more important is how we do it. And how we do it really isn't what rules and limits we set, or even what consequences we have. Because you see, you will be the judge of what are the best rules and limits for your household. I don't think there is anybody in my line of work as a marriage counselor who has any business telling you what values and what rules and what limits you should have in your house with your kids. I don't live there. You have the goals that you want to achieve with your child. You should decide what rules and what limits you have. The same thing goes with consequences for another very good reason, and that is nobody is an expert on your child except you. Some of you may say, I don't think I am either, but that's not the point. If there isn't anybody, it certainly isn't somebody else, it's you. So what consequences will work with a particular child are more likely to be consequences you know about than somebody else. And the thing is, time changes things. Your kids will respond to one consequence one time and another consequence another time. I had a friend, any of you have more than one child, you know that they don't respond to the same things. I had one friend, he had 4 kids. I have 4 kids, one of each. And that's the way it is, folks. And so you've got to figure out what consequences. But there is only one how. And the how is whether or not we are consistent so that they pay attention to us. If they don't pay attention to us, it doesn't matter how good these are, folks. It won't work. The best you will get is a lucky break. With consistency, you can predict what's going to happen. You can make certain that these things turn out. I mean, when I made certain that they stopped squabbling, it took me about 2.5 minutes of my time to get it solved. I don't know how much of their time it took, but they had to work it out. So this is the how. And how you do it is far more important than what you do. A lot of different rules and limits will work. A lot of different consequences will work. You pick the ones that work best with a child because then you'll get the best results. But you will get good results even with consequences and rules sort of that aren't exactly on, as long as you're consistent. This is what makes it work. The good news and the bad news is the same, and that is that it takes disciplined parents to have disciplined kids. That's really what it's about. Because you see, the hard part of parenting, not of being a mom or dad, baking cookies, going on picnics, playing ball, whatever, that's fun. The hard part is when you have to say, this is the way things are and this is where we stand and I'm not going to budge. And that's consistency. How many of you say, oh, it's just easier to do it myself? You ever said that? Well, it is, but it isn't. It's easier right then. It's harder later on when the child decides, I don't have to do it because you will. So, disciplined kids come from disciplined parents. It's the discipline of sticking by this so the child knows, if I don't get responsible, take care of things, if I fail here and I don't discipline myself, then they'll do it for me, and guess what? They'll take away my choices and my control. That's the deal. If you want this out here, I don't care, but you better be out here with it. And this self-discipline always runs a slow third, even for us. How many of you do everything that you intend to do? How many of you ever heard the word procrastination? That's this one, folks. Happens to us all the time. But we need enough self-discipline to control our consequences. That's all self-discipline does, is control our consequences. Nothing else. It's nothing magical. Think about it. If you discipline yourself to do something now so you don't have to do it later, it controls your consequences. That's what it's all about. So if you want to control them, be self-disciplined enough to get the job done, whatever it is, so that you can then be in charge. Okay? The thing that you're teaching in all this is the idea, take me seriously. Because a child is making a decision, either to take you seriously or to ignore you. And that's where they make the decision. They don't make it here, and they don't make it here. If you've got the wrong consequence and you're consistent, within a very short period of time, you'll know this one doesn't work with this kid. I need to up the ante or something. But if you're not consistent, you don't know whether the consequence would or wouldn't work. So, take me seriously. I mean what I say. You don't have to be harsh. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to be overbearing. You don't have to be abusive. You just have to mean what you say. If you don't mean what you say, the child knows it. Had a neighbor years ago. And when my kids were little, we had a big sandbox in the backyard. I mean, a big sandbox. And it was about 20 feet long and about 6 feet wide and 2 feet deep. But with 5 kids, you need a lot of sand. And a lot of kids would come over there and they would play. And there was a neighbor boy, he was about 3 or 4, who was over there playing. And it was a summer afternoon, and it was sunny and bright and warm out, and the windows in the house were open. I was in the back of the house, and I heard this boy's father call him. He says, Charlie, Charlie, come on home. Nothing. And I wasn't paying much attention to it, but then I heard one of my kids say, Charlie, your dad just called. And Charlie said, I don't have to go yet. That's interesting. Now, by the way, I'm a marriage counselor now, but when I was listening to Charlie, I was flying planes in the Navy. I didn't raise my kids as a marriage counselor. I had never read a book on psychology. I had never taken a course on it. I hadn't read anything on parenting. I learned it in the trenches, folks, just the way you are. But anyway, I heard this, and Charlie, and he says, I don't have to go yet. So a couple of minutes went by. I was busy doing something in the back of the house, and I heard again, Charlie, Charlie, come on home. Silence. One of my kids again says, Charlie, your dad called again. He said, I don't have to go yet. So I thought, what's going on? So I walked over and I peeked out the window because I was looking right out on the sandbox, and here was Charlie, and he's a neat little guy, and he had a truck, one little toy truck, and he was making roads in the sand, just having a wonderful time, and just totally ignoring his dad. And while I was watching, his dad called again. He said, Charlie, Charlie, come on home. And he sat there and he kept making roads. He didn't even look up. Like I said, Charlie, your dad called again. He said, I don't have to go yet. And while he was doing this, all of a sudden we heard, Charlie! And his kid, just as a matter of fact, he got up, dropped the car. He says, I got to go now. Off he went. Now, consistency, folks. Charlie's dad was not inconsistent. The mom in the airport was inconsistent because we didn't know what she'd do or if she'd do anything. Maybe sometimes she does, sometimes she doesn't. But Charlie already knew Dad is consistent. He will say it and say it and say it, and then he will yell. And when he yells, that's when I have to go. So Charlie knew, I don't need to listen to Dad's word, just listen to his tone. When his tone changes, it's time to head home. Now, that's consistency. The problem with that is, if you teach your kids that I will say it 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 times or whatever, and then I will do something, they'll know that when you get to that point, then it's time to act. Before then, I can ignore you. If you want to get rid of that, all you have to do is say it once and go get. If Charlie's dad came out once and said, Charlie, come on home, and then came right over, because he knew where he was, just came over and got him. That kid would be so surprised. What are you doing here? You know, I called you. Yeah, I know, but you didn't yell. That's what he would have said. I've heard him say it. Okay. So, a couple of other things. One of the things you can do is you can avoid nagging, which is a very bad way to be inconsistent. When my kids were little, we had a big playroom. And the playroom was the place where everybody congregated after school. And that was fine. But usually that also meant their book bags and their shoes and whatever else didn't belong there ended up there because they weren't going to make the 30 extra steps to their room to drop it off there. And then every day, you know, you go through this thing of get the room cleaned up. So a little bit of nagging. Come in. You kids, get this room picked up. How many times do I have to tell you after all I do for you? And this is the kind of thanks I get for it. And you know what they do? They grab something and they kind of run around like this. You know, and then as soon as I quit, walked out of the room, they drop it. Then they go back to watching TV or whatever they were doing. I didn't get the room picked up. I got it rearranged. That was what I wanted. I wanted it picked up. So I said, okay, I'm going to do it without the nagging. So I thought about it and I walked in, and they were basically grammar school age at this time. So a couple were sitting there watching television, one who was always reading, another playing game. So I walked in, I walked over, and bam, I turned off the TV. I had one of those little push buttons. It was really easy. Pow! I got instant attention. Hi, Dad. What are you doing here? And I said, okay, kids, new rule. Oh, another new rule. Weird, Dad. Another new rule. I said, the rule is this. When I get home, if this room is not picked up, and that means all this stuff that you know goes in your rooms is in here, any of it, the TV goes off, and that means everything stops. See, because I had one who was reading a book. She didn't care. TV's off, big deal. Everything stops. You stop playing the game, you put down the book, all of you, until this room is picked up. As soon as it's picked up, you can go back to doing whatever you're doing. Now, how many of you ever tried to get a room picked up? How long does it take? 30 minutes? 45 minutes? 3 hours? Screaming and yelling? Chasing them down? You know what? With my system, it takes 45 seconds. Don't go look at their rooms. But Hey, I told them this. I said, you all understand that? And what do you think they're going to answer? No, Dad, we don't understand. Why didn't you tell us again? No, of course they said yes. If they hadn't, what did he say? I don't know what he said, but say yes. Yeah, Dad, we understand. I said, okay. So I figured if they understood, they'd know what to do. I walked out of the room. I wasn't going to do the thinking and problem solving for them. If you understand it, work it out. I left. Guess what? Bam, they grabbed their stuff, woof, down the hall, into their rooms, boom, slam the door, back out, turn on the TV. Now, if they've been watching a program for 57.5 minutes, it takes even less time to get it picked up. Now, some people say, well, how'd it work? I thought it worked fine. I turned off the TV probably an average of 3 times a week. But my job was I wanted to do it without nagging. I did it without nagging. When I came in, if there was anything there, bam, I turned it off, went to my room. By the time I came back out, coat and tie off, room's cleaned up, kids are doing what they're doing. Hi, Dad. Hi, kids. Everybody's in a good mood. We haven't had screaming and yelling. So, now some people would say, yeah, but if you had to turn it off 3 times a week, that means that they still weren't picking it up. I didn't tell them to pick it up before I got home. I told them if they didn't pick it up before I got home, then they would have to pick it up when I got home. I didn't care if they acted as adults or acted as kids. I figured as long as they want to do this, they were learning. You know, someday they're going to finally decide, I want to get weird Dad off my back. And we'll pick it up ahead of time. But I didn't care. Now, if I had really cared, if I had said, I want this room picked up so when I walk in, I can look upon a vista of cleanliness. If I'd wanted that, then I would have done it differently. I would have said, by the way, when I turn off the TV, that means everything stops except 1 hour of housework from every single one of you. How many times do you think they want to do an hour of housework? 1 time. I would say 1 time, and I probably could have walked in every day and had it cleaned up. I didn't care. See, because there was a second part. My goal was to do it without the nagging. But the other part of what I did by coming in every day, and if there was something out there, shutting off the TV, was I sent them a very, very important message. The message was, pay attention to me, I mean what I say. Pay attention to me, I mean what I say. Pay attention to me, I mean what I say. Then when there was a really important issue, and I wanted them to pay attention right now, they knew we better pay attention because Dad means what he says. So it's little things, folks, that you can teach your kids. Pay attention to me. It doesn't have to be blockbusters. And the consequences don't have to be severe. All I was doing was turn off the TV. I wasn't even touching them. I didn't even glare. I smiled. Bing, off goes the TV. I could smile because they were the ones suffering. Why shouldn't I smile? Boom. We're dead again. Okay. There's some other things you can also avoid arguing. By the way, there are 7 deadly sins of communication. They are nagging, lecturing, arguing, yelling, threatening, pleading, and criticizing. None of them work unless you back them up with action. They're a waste of time because if you don't follow through, it doesn't matter what you say. So don't say it. Just do something. Anyway, to end arguing, what's the best answer if the kid wants to argue with you? Come on, you know, it's just like, I don't know. And because. Haven't you used that one? Oh, because. You're not going to get me into it. And that works, but there are other things you can do. I had a situation, you want the room cleaned up. Not the playroom, but their room. Now, in order to avoid the arguing and the nagging, or to avoid the nagging, you set a limit, just like I did. The limit was when I walked through the door, off goes the TV. With a room, clean up your room when you get home. If when I get home at whatever time it's not clean, you've passed the limit. So the limit was when I walked through the door. Or let's say, better yet, let's make it something very definite. Clean up your room by dinner time. That's definite. Now, dinner may not always happen at the same time, but they know, thinking and problem solving for yourself. Figure it out. You know dinner happens. It happens late in the day. Do it. So I said, clean up your room before dinner. Now, what happens? You watch them in there. They're playing. They're watching television. You know they're not doing it. One of them's outside with a buddy. You've only got 15 more minutes before dinner. No, you don't say a word. That's nagging. Nothing. I left it up to them. It's your responsibility. You figure it out. So, what happens? come in. Dinner? Oh, good, I'm starved. What do we have? Oh, my favorite dinner. By the way, did you clean up your room? Oh, no, I what? Forgot. You forgot. Oh, well, that's okay because you can go do it now. But I'm hungry now. That's all right. You'll still be hungry after you clean up your room. See, I'm not going to get in an argument with you. Well, you're not very nice. I didn't say I was. Well, fine, I just won't have dinner. I say, fine. That'll give you more time to clean up your room. I didn't say anything about if you don't clean up your room, you don't eat dinner, you don't have to clean it up. I said clean it up by dinner time. It's now dinner time. You can eat or not. I'm just saying you don't eat until it's done. That's all. No arguing. So we can get away from a lot of that faulty communication. Another one that comes up in this area of thinking and problem solving for yourself. And it's a little thing, but it's the little things that if you can get hold of them and begin to turn them over, think about, how does this work with my child? You can get out of the parenting business and really work them into it. We never had a curfew at our house. You know, time, you got to be home. My kids got home at reasonable times. A couple of them, I wish they'd stayed out a little bit longer. But I had one who used to, by 9 o'clock, he was ready to hit the sack. And so they came home at reasonable times. But when you get teenagers and they're headed out to do different activities, sometimes they would say, well, what time should I be home? Okay, give you another test. They're going to a football game, out for pizza afterwards. So the game, let's say, starts at about 7. What time should they be home? Anybody? What time should they be home? What? 11? Okay. What time? Anybody? What time should they be home? About midnight. Okay. I've had some people who said, well, I don't know, I need to check where's the game going to be. You know, it might be they have to drive to another school for it, and then they're going to come back and drive back and get pizza, and where are they going to do that? I said, that's great, but who's doing the thinking and problem solving? See, you are again. If you say be home at 11 or 12, it may be a good answer. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the answer. I'm talking about getting out of the business of giving answers, particularly when you don't need to. If my kids said, what time should I be home? My answer was, what time do you think you ought to be home? No, I want to know. I've got a 16-year-old going out the door. He doesn't know what time to be home. I don't know if I should let him go. Hey? I don't know what time I ought to be home. Well, then you better go think about it. Hey? Now, if they said, 4 in the morning, well, what can I say? Think again. Yeah, I don't have to settle for the answer. So, what time? Okay, what time? Well, I don't know what time. Well, then you better go think about, but Dad, they're waiting for me out front. Well, then you better think real fast. Well, how about 11:30? That sounds good. Goodbye. Who did the thinking? See, I want the child, 1, to understand I should be doing it, and 2, that Dad believes in me enough that he thinks I can. I want them to know I can figure this out for myself. I don't need weird Dad figuring it out for me. Okay. Now, we've talked about the discipline system. What are the 3 things that make it up? And by the way, folks, you already knew these. I know you knew them because you're doing them. The important part of it is how consistent are you being? Because the rest of this, anybody can figure it out. And by the way, you don't need any particular set of rules or consequences. Anybody's ideas about rules and consequences will probably, sort through them, find out the ones you like. But consistency, that's the one thing that you've got to be stiff on yourself about. You've got to be disciplined about that. And the other part of it is, this is what comes from it. If you noticed, I gave you illustrations where the child had to take over and do these things, not because they wanted to, but because they wanted to control their consequences. And the only way to do that, the only way to get a hand on this was to do these as well. Because if you don't do these, you don't get this one. When I said the TV's off until the room is picked up, that's all I was doing. 2 minutes later, it's back up there. It doesn't have to take forever. It just has to get the point across that you lost your choices. By the way, that is the consequence that burns the most. You lost your consequences. You lost your choices. We don't want to lose our choices. That's one of the things about our country is the fact that we are able to live our lives, hopefully, running our lives as long as we're responsible and self-disciplined. As long as we live by the rules and do what we're supposed to, the agreement, the contract between us and our country is we'll leave you alone. Well, that's the same one with your kids. See, when my kids grew up and got out in the world, they didn't say, wow, how are things running out here? They said, this is the way that weird dad ran it at home. I know how this one works. So they didn't have to change. This isn't something that's different when they're 2 or 12 or 20. It's the same. Because the principles stay the same. What rules you have and what consequences will vary as time goes on, but the principles remain the same. Now let's tie all this together. And I'm going to tell you a story about a mother that came in, and she had a son. He was 12. Lots of parents come in when their kids hit 11, 12, 13. That's before they lose all their hair. And so she came in, and she had several things she wanted to deal with. He wasn't doing too well in school, a couple other things. But one of them was he never remembers to take his lunch. And I said, okay. So she says, well, I'm tired of that. I want him to take his lunch. I said, well, what happens? She says, well, he's busy in the last thing in the morning. He's not thinking. His head's off someplace else. And out the door he goes, and the lunch is still sitting there. And he gets to school, and he has them in the office. I call my mom, tell her that I forgot my lunch, and have her bring it down. And so they call me, and then I take the lunch down. And I said, well, okay. So what do you want to do about it? She said, well, I want to stop taking the lunch. And I said, stop. She didn't need to be paying me for that answer. And so she said, you see, now this is where the consistency comes in, folks, because her next statement was, well, but doesn't that make me a bad mom? See, there was mom again. We weren't talking about being a mom. We were talking about being a parent. And I convinced her, no, it wasn't a bad mom. I said, look, if he can go without lunch, he's not going to die between now and dinner time anyway. So, what's so bad about it? Well, I don't know. I just thought maybe it meant that I wasn't being very good if I didn't do this for him. So we talked about it. She finally decided she would not take the lunch. And I said, look, if he goes without it, he goes without it. So then we rehearsed it because she said, I'm going home tonight and I'm going to tell him, tomorrow I'm not taking your lunch. I said, don't say a word to him. Don't warn him. The shock value alone is going to help get your message across. Tomorrow, and so she didn't. Sure enough, he went without the lunch. She gets the call from school, and we rehearsed all this. And they called, and they said, your son forgot his lunch. And she said, tell my son we will have dinner early. And then she hung up. What's the secretary going to do? Call her back and say, you get down here with it? That's a new answer. So he comes in at lunchtime. Hi, where's my lunch? Oh, it isn't here. Well, didn't you call my mom? Yes, we called her. She said that you would have dinner early. And he's looking like, you must have called the wrong house. That's not my mom. Dinner early. And then I told her, don't answer the phone, because it rang 3 separate times during his half-hour lunch period. He was at school trying to get home. Mom, get down here. And if she'd answered it, I know what would have happened. Mom, I'm dying. If I don't have a lunch, I'll pass out in 5th period. And she'd have run it down. I said, don't answer the phone. I figured it was much easier to get her to do that. She didn't. About 3 o'clock that afternoon, the front door goes, Mother! She says, yes, son. She said, I didn't get my lunch today. She said, I know. They told me you said we'd have dinner early. She said, we will, son. He said, well, Mom, you know what it felt like to go without lunch? She said, well, I have an idea. What's important is, do you know what it felt like? Because, yeah. See, there's this scientific principle that diet improves the memory. And you know what? It did, folks. It did. The next day, he remembered his lunch. See, so all of a sudden, we go from no responsibility, he starts remembering the lunch. And he remembers self-discipline enough to take it. So she was back the next week, and I said, how's it going? She said, well, it's doing just fine. He's taking his lunch every day. And then she said, what if he forgets it? Should I take it? Hello? Hello? I said, I don't think we've got the whole lesson here. Consistency. You turn it over to him, leave it with him. So sure enough, the next week, about midweek, he forgot it. Now the interesting thing, he did not call. And the next day, he set his lunch at the front door, so he had to step over it to get out. Now, folks, all she did was stop taking a lunch. She consistently went from taking it to consistently not taking it. When she did that, he became responsible, he became self-disciplined, and he even figured out how to make sure he didn't go without it. And that's all she did. And you'll find that in many cases, that's all you need to do, is believe in your child and say, I am convinced you're capable of this, and I'm going to hold you accountable. And I'm not going to do it for you anymore. See, the purpose of raising adults is for us to train our children to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem in our society. And it's not enough just to be a good mom or a good dad. That's wonderful, and I hope you are, and I hope your kids love the dickens out of you. But what is equally important, and for their long-term success, far more important, is to be a disciplined parent and say, I'm going to be consistent, and I'm going to hold my kids accountable. And what I'm going to find is that they'll measure up. And if you need to be weird, be weird. I'm not sure. Maybe that was part of what worked for me. Weird dad. But good moms and good dads is just the beginning. Disciplined parents is what makes it all come together. That means there's a cost, because it costs something to be disciplined and to stick by what you say. And sometimes it's hard. But the real question is, are your kids worth it? Thanks.